Well, we know the issue of equalization might come up at today's meeting, but at least one leader is hoping it doesn't. Saskatchewan Premier Brad Wall says talking about the so-called have versus have-not provinces will only distract from the bigger picture economic talks that must go on. Premier Brad Wall joins us today from Ottawa. So, Premier Wall, tell me more about this aversion to talk of equalization payments. Is it simply that the subject is too complex, too time-consuming to be dealt with at a 3-hour meeting?
Well, good morning, Nancy. A couple of points. I think that there are obviously pretty clear priorities that all premiers and the national government should be focusing on in terms of what's going on with respect to world markets and the economy of our country. Equalization is a part of that discussion. I know finance ministers dealt with it earlier on in their meeting, and that's probably the right place for any discussions of the changes to occur. At this meeting, I think we can be focusing on things like infrastructure investment in this country, and it's an area where there's a lot of agreement between the provinces, and I would expect the national government that we could accelerate infrastructure investments in our respective jurisdictions and nationally. In our province, we're going to be dramatically increasing our infrastructure investment to $1.5 billion. Historically, it topped out at around $600 million not very long ago. So big increase there. And again, I think the federal government can play a good role in this regard as well. There are other issues. People are worried about their pensions. I think we can make some changes. We've heard Premier Campbell talk about some suggestions around the RIF age conversion limits that we could ensure that people aren't crystallizing the losses in the marketplace prematurely, provide some flexibility for people with their retirements. So these are positive things we can move forward with. In our case in Saskatchewan, we really want to encourage the national government to work with the provinces to focus on First Nations education and entrepreneurial opportunities. We have higher structural unemployment amongst First Nations in Saskatchewan at a time of a labor shortage. We know their engagement in the economy is obviously good for the economy, very good obviously for First Nations and Métis people as well. So there's some other issues I think that we can be focusing on today and in the subsequent meeting in the new year.
You know, it's very interesting just to hear you, because I think a lot of people assume 3 hours is not a lot of time to deal with some very daunting challenges. But you've just listed some very specific initiatives. I've heard other premiers talk about it as well. I have to assume that if everyone has converged on Ottawa for a face-to-face meeting, there is some expectation or pressure to come away from this with a plan of action. Are you expecting to come away later today with agreement on investment in infrastructure and some sort of national consensus on easing up some of the rules as they apply to pension plans and RRSPs?
Well, this meeting will be very much about preparing for the first in a very long time, a formal First Minister's meeting for our country early in the new year. And I think the PMO was making those kinds of comments over the weekend. And we know as premiers that this is something that we need to do to have a formal and full First Minister's conference where preparation begins at this meeting today, and then officials follow through on that. That does not preclude governments from acting. I mean, each government, I think, is ensuring that financial institutions in our respective jurisdictions, credit unions, smaller trusts are stable, and certainly that's the case with the national government as they continue to ensure market liquidity. So it doesn't preclude action now, Nancy, but this will very much set the stage for a meeting where those kinds of results can potentially happen in the new year. And I think it's important we gather together, identify where there's some common ground, as I believe there will be on the side of infrastructure, and individual actions by provinces to make sure that obviously the financial institutions are on solid ground, as they very much seem to be, but also that we're taking some action with respect to the pension issue for people who are looking at some large potential losses now if they actually had to start monetizing, to start taking advantage of their savings, of their retirement.
Tell me a bit more about the situation in your province. I mean, Saskatchewan is actually in pretty good shape relative to other provinces. So what are the challenges? How has the economic downturn affected your province's economic future and the kind of economic forecast that you're basing any government action on?
Well, we see now all the chartered banks forecasting that our province will lead the country in economic growth, something we're very grateful for. We want to continue to capitalize on that momentum that we have in the province. You know, we're a have province now, and we're proud of that. We're also mindful of the fact that we have benefited mightily from equalization in previous years and benefited from the fiscal federation, and we're grateful for that. And so we're happy to contribute. And I guess that's a part of our message here and in subsequent meetings, Nancy, is that let's make sure that whatever we undertake nationally to ensure that our economy can certainly get through this economic storm and emerge on the other side stronger, let us not penalize or handicap those parts of the national economy that are working quite well, that are still growing. That's the case in Saskatchewan. We're not immune in any way to what's going on around the world. We see the tightening of the credit tightening is arguably going to have an impact on the larger projects possibly going forward, perhaps some delay in terms of those on the resource development side. But we also see forecasts for increased drilling in oil and gas. And our government's going to be moving aggressively towards an innovation agenda so we can diversify away from too much of a reliance on the resource economy and start focusing on the fact that we have Canada's only synchrotron and the Petroleum Research Centre that's leading in carbon capture sequestration. These kinds of investments are important, and we'll look for other partners in this as well as to diversify, by the way, and I think it's important for the country to look at opportunities to diversify away from a dependence that we may have with respect to our exports into the United States. 60% of our exports in the province are destined for that country, and we value that trading partnership and that friendship, but we're going to be looking to diversify to other parts of the world, and we think it's important for really the country to be doing similar things with respect to Europe and Asia as well.
Obviously, lots on your plate, Premier, today and beyond. Look forward to hearing about the upshot of today's meeting. Thanks for joining us today.
Nancy, thanks for the time to be on the show.